It all started as a grand adventure. We were 5 friends from Toronto, Canada: Jack, Emma, Mark, Lily, and me, Tom. We had known each other since high school. Our bond solidified through countless road trips, camping escapades, and late-night heart-to-hearts. Each of us had our quirks. Jack, the fearless leader; Emma, the sensitive artist; Mark, the practical joker; Lily, the voice of reason; and me, the introspective writer. This year, we decided to take our most ambitious trip yet, a vacation to Australia. We were drawn by the allure of its wild beauty, diverse wildlife, and the promise of unforgettable experiences. The plan was simple: 2 weeks exploring Sydney, the Great Barrier Reef, and finally, the remote outback. Our trip had been fantastic so far. Sydney's vibrant city life, the serene beauty of the Great Barrier Reef, and the endless expanse of the outback had all left us in awe. We were on the last leg of our journey, looking for one final thrill before heading back to Canada. That's when we heard about the Night Crocodile Tour. It was in a small pub in a dusty outback town where we met Mick. He was rough around the edges, with a grizzled beard and a twinkle in his eye that suggested he'd seen more than his fair share of adventure. He offered us a deal on a night tour of the local swamps, promising an up-close look at some of Australia's most fearsome predators. Jack was immediately on board, his adventurous spirit undeterred by Mick's rough appearance. Mark and Emma, always up for something new, agreed as well. Lily and I hesitated, sensing something off about Mick and his too-good-to-be-true offer. But peer pressure won out, and soon we were heading to the swamp. Excitement and unease mingling in the pit of my stomach. Mick's boat was old and battered, a far cry from the sturdy vessels we'd imagined. The swamp was eerie at night, the air thick with humidity and the constant buzz of insects. The water was black and still, reflecting the moonlight in an almost supernatural way. We were all on edge but exhilarated. As we ventured further, Mick pointed out the glowing eyes of crocodiles in the distance. It was both terrifying and fascinating. The silence was only broken by the occasional splash of a fish or the distant call of a bird. The atmosphere was tense, each of us lost in our thoughts, the earlier camaraderie replaced by a shared sense of foreboding. Suddenly, the boat jerked violently. The current had picked up unexpectedly, and we were being pulled towards a set of rapids. Mick swore under his breath, trying to steer us clear, but it was too late. We hit the rapids hard. The boat crashed into the rocks, splitting apart. Panic set in as water rushed in. I was thrown overboard and struggled to keep my head above water. In the chaos, I managed to grab onto a low-hanging branch and pull myself up into a tree. The scene around me was pure terror. Jack was the first to go. A massive crocodile surged out of the water, its jaws clamping around him before dragging him under. His scream was cut short. Emma and Mark were trying to swim to another tree, but they weren't fast enough. Another crocodile appeared, taking Mark. Emma made it to the tree but was in shock, shaking and crying uncontrollably. Lily, somehow, had made it to the same tree as me. We clung to the branches, the reality of our situation sinking in. We were surrounded by crocodile-infested water in the middle of nowhere. Mick was gone, likely pulled under by the current or one of the crocodiles. We spent hours in that tree, trying to come up with a plan. Every movement in the water sent our hearts racing. At dawn, we decided to make a break for it. We saw a possible path to another tree that led to higher ground. The swim was treacherous, but it was our only chance. Emma went first, followed by Lily. I was last. Halfway through, I felt something brush against my leg. Panic surged through me, and I kicked wildly. The crocodile's jaws closed around my calf, and I screamed in agony. With every ounce of strength, I fought, kicking at its eyes. It released me, but the damage was done. My leg was bleeding badly. Lily and Emma pulled me to safety, and we hobbled to higher ground. The sun was rising, and we could hear the distant sound of a helicopter. We waved frantically, and by some miracle, they saw us. Rescue came in the form of local authorities, who had received a distress call about an unlicensed tour. They airlifted us out, but the experience left us scarred. Jack and Mark were gone, and I was left with a deep gash in my leg that would take months to heal. The swamp had taken its toll on us, and we vowed never to take such risks again. The thrill we sought had turned into a nightmare, one that would haunt us for the rest of our lives.
Title: The Case That Haunts Me. Posted by You Reader Detective 42. I've been retired for 5 years now, but there's one case that still haunts me. It's the kind of thing that keeps you up at night, wondering what you missed or what you could have done differently. I was a detective in a small town, The kind of place where everyone knows everyone. You'd think that would make solving crimes easier. But sometimes it just makes things more complicated. It started with a missing child report. Emily Johnson, a sweet little girl of 7, vanished from her home one evening. Her parents, Mark and Linda, called it in. They were frantic, as you'd expect. But something about their story didn't sit right with me from the beginning. They claimed they'd put Emily to bed around p.m., then went to watch TV. When they checked on her an hour later, she was gone. There was no sign of forced entry, no struggle, nothing. We combed the area, interviewed neighbors, friends, family, anyone who might have seen or heard something. But it was as if Emily had just disappeared into thin air. I brought the parents in for questioning multiple times. They were cooperative, but there were inconsistencies in their stories. Small things, but enough to raise red flags. Despite our best efforts, we had no concrete evidence to charge them with anything. 2 weeks later, Mark and Linda went missing. They didn't show up for work, didn't answer their phones. When we went to their house, it looked like they had just stepped out for a moment. Their wallets, keys, even Linda's purse were all there. We launched a manhunt, but it was as fruitless as the search for Emily. 3 years went by. I thought about that case every day. Then, one summer morning, a fisherman reported a car submerged in a nearby lake. When we pulled it out, it was the Johnsons' vehicle. Inside, we found Linda's bra, but no bodies. How did the car end up there? Why was there no sign of them? It only added more questions to an already baffling case. A year later, we got another break, or so we thought. A contractor renovating the Johnsons' old house found Mark's body buried under the crawl space. There were no obvious signs of trauma, no indication of how he died. The medical examiner couldn't determine the cause of death. And without more evidence, the case was closed. It felt like giving up. I've replayed every step of that investigation in my head 1,000 times. I combed through the old files, looking for something I might have missed. Some clue that could shed light on what happened to that family. But there's nothing. Just a little girl who vanished, parents who disappeared, and a father who turned up dead years later. No answers, just endless questions. Now, sitting here in my retirement, I can't help but feel like I failed them. Maybe if I'd pushed harder, looked deeper, things would be different. But all I'm left with are the ghosts of the past and a case that will never be solved.
The sun was setting behind the mountains when Mom and Dad called us into the living room. Dad had that serious look on his face, the one he got when he needed to talk about something important. Evan, Oliver, Mom began, kneeling down to be at eye level with my 6-year-old brother. Your dad and I have to go to Calgary tonight. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson are celebrating their anniversary, and it's important we're there. I nodded, trying to look more confident than I felt. I was 14, and while I'd stayed home alone before, this would be the first time I'd be responsible for Oliver overnight. You'll be fine, right? Dad asked, looking directly at me. We'll be back first thing in the morning. Of course, Dad, I replied, hoping my voice didn't betray my nerves. We'll be fine. Mom hugged Oliver tightly. Evan knows what to do. If anything happens, you call us immediately, okay? Okay, Mom, Oliver said. Though his eyes were already starting to water, I put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. With final hugs and reassurances, Mom and Dad left, the sound of their car engine fading into the distance. The cabin felt much quieter without them, the usual comforting creaks and groans of the old wood suddenly more noticeable. As night fell, the forest around us seemed to close in. The wind picked up, howling through the trees and rattling the windows. I tried to keep Oliver entertained with cartoons and snacks, but I could feel his unease growing, mirroring my own. Evan, can we have popcorn? Oliver asked, his voice a bit shaky. Sure, Bud, I replied, grateful for the distraction. I made my way to the kitchen, the old wooden floorboards creaking underfoot. As I waited for the popcorn to pop, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The shadows outside seemed to shift and move, playing tricks on my mind. I told myself it was just the wind and the trees, but the feeling of being watched persisted. The popping of the corn provided a temporary reprieve from my anxiety, but as I poured it into a bowl and headed back to the living room, I caught a glimpse of something outside, a flash of movement near the edge of the forest. I froze, straining to see through the darkness. Nothing, just my imagination, I told myself, but the sense of unease grew stronger. I handed Oliver the bowl and sat beside him, trying to focus on the cartoon characters bouncing around on the screen. Yet, I couldn't help but glance towards the window every few minutes, my heart racing. Then came the first knock, soft, almost imperceptible, but distinct. My breath caught in my throat. Oliver didn't seem to notice, his attention still on the TV. Another knock, louder this time. I stood up slowly, moving towards the front door, my mind racing. Who would be out here at this hour? And why? Who is it? I called out, my voice trembling slightly. No answer, just the wind and the trees. I looked through the peephole, but all I saw was darkness. Evan, what's wrong? Oliver's voice was small and scared. Nothing, Oli. I lied, forcing a smile. Just stay here and watch your show, okay? I grabbed my phone and texted Mom, trying to stay calm. Someone's outside. Heard knocking. What should I do? Seconds felt like hours as I waited for her reply. Finally, my phone buzzed. Lock the doors. Call 911 if it happens again. Stay calm. I locked the front door and checked the back, making sure all the windows were secure. I tried to stay calm for Oliver's sake, but my heart was pounding. Another knock, this time more insistent. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I dialed 911, my hands shaking as I explained the situation. Help is on the way, the dispatcher assured me. Stay on the line. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and moved back to the living room where Oliver was now standing, clutching his blanket. Evan, I'm scared, he whispered. Me too, Oli, I admitted, pulling him close. But we'll be okay. The police are coming. Minutes felt like hours. The knocking stopped, replaced by the sound of footsteps circling the cabin. I kept Oliver close, my eyes darting to every window, every shadow. Finally, the sound of sirens cut through the night. Red and blue lights flashed outside as the police car pulled up. 2 officers approached the cabin, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Evan Matthews? One of them called out. It's the police. You're safe now. I opened the door, relief flooding through me as the officers stepped inside. They searched the perimeter but found no one. The man who had been stalking us was gone, at least for now. He might come back, one of the officers warned. We'll keep an eye on the area, but stay alert. Lock your doors and call us if anything happens. Mom and Dad arrived shortly after, their faces pale with worry. They hugged us tightly, apologizing for leaving us alone. That night, as I lay in bed with Oliver sleeping beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that the man was still out there, watching and waiting. The police assured us we were safe, but in the mountains of Alberta, safety felt like a fragile thing, easily shattered by the darkness just beyond our windows.